Labas rytas,
Good morning, dear participants of the conference, dear guests. We would like to start our international conference entitled Protection of the Child's Right. Will the state take over the role of parents? Before we open our conference, I would like to invite you all to pay tribute to those who died for the freedom and democratic values in Ukraine by a minute of silence. Thank you. This conference will deal with the experiences of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Great Britain, Australia, and how those countries protect children's rights. We will discuss the cases of when children are taken from their families, and these cases are more and more widespread in the Western countries. We will also discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of different childcare systems. Among the keynote speakers are the President of the Nordic Committee of Human Rights, Ruby Harald Klisen, lawyer from Denmark, Søren Bernhard Lindegaard, representatives of embassies residing in Lithuania, representatives of public authorities, journalists, Parents Forum of Western Lithuania, representatives of Lithuanian Parents Forum, and members of other non-governmental organizations, and individual advocates of children's and family rights. This event is intended for our politicians in the first place, for our civil servants, for our NGOs who take care of family welfare and protection of the child's rights in Lithuania. We often hear many experts saying to follow the experiences of Nordic countries, and we are often encouraged to transpose them in Lithuania almost blindly, without even thinking. The European Court of Justice says that we should be cautious in taking over these experiences from the Nordic countries. This also relates to adoptions. This also relates to reforms in the foster care system. Now, we would like to start working on the agenda of our conference. I would like to ask you about the agenda. Do you have? Well, I think that we will first hear our keynote speakers, and at 12 o'clock, after the presentations, we could have a question and answer session, and it will be the time for your short interventions. We would like to ask you to be as brief as possible. At the moment, there are 3 members of the parliament who have registered for their interventions. At 10 past 12, we will have a short break, and then we will continue with our work. And we plan to end our conference at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, if there are no objections, I would like to announce our conference open. First of all, I will pass the floor to the Director of the Intervention Services for Autism and Development Delay, Director of the Lithuanian department. She's an educologist, a family consultant, Jurgita Račė. She will speak on the topic of family as the basis for child's life.
Tai labai diena visiems.
Good morning.
And I would like to convey best wishes to you all from Australia, from Jura Tender. And first of all, I would like to briefly introduce to you Jura Tender, who is a clinical psychologist and the founder of ISADD organization. In the beginning, I would like to describe the organization, which is an international organization providing intervention services for autism and development delay. And at the same time, the organization improving their everyday life. It is interesting to note that this organization has been successfully developing its activities for 20 years already, and you see green areas marking places where this organization is carrying its activities as well as cooperation activities, which is the New Zealand, Indonesia, Singapore, and I am really satisfied to note that for 8 years already it has been carrying out successful activities in Lithuania. Why some regions in America are marked in different color? It is because Jura Tender has been invited to the international conference held in America to discuss the problems of children with different disabilities and to exchange good practice. In my presentation, I will speak about children's rights and how much the state should seek to ensure these rights, as well as the rights of children with certain disabilities. Why we sometimes fail to ensure the necessary balance between rights and duties of the child. Who should be held responsible here? So, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, issued in 1959, Declaration of the Rights of the Child, states that each child has the right to be safe, secure, educated, and have opportunities to disclose its own potential. And as much as possible, he or she should grow in the family with a parent's responsibility. In spite of that, the child has to be protected from any improper behavior with him, violence and exploitation. In many cases, what the family needs is assistance, advice, and if this is received in time, the child will grow healthy and psychologically firm. In this particular slide, I would like to draw your attention to one particular word. Jura Tender is a Lithuanian herself, and she has used the word to confiscate in Lithuanian, which doesn't really mean that by confiscating children from family, you may achieve anything good. There were cases when children from Aboriginal families were removed from their families and given over to step-parents in order for them to get a better education. What happened? In Australia, we have the concept of the lost generation. These are people who didn't have the necessary skills to raise their children, and this is how certain psychological and mental problems emerged. Based on this experience, today Australia does not have any foster homes nor orphanages, and the experience of Australia is that children raised in outside their families have no skills to raise their own children. Usually, this is what costs Australia very big amounts of money. It happens that children are raised in their families, looked after other people. Bringing up in the family is inseparable, is unchangeable, unreplaceable. The lack of understanding how father and mother behave involve children and their families into personal problems that families are facing. The Declaration of the Rights of the Child declares that the child who is physically, mentally, or socially handicapped shall be given the special treatment, education, and care regulated by his particular condition. So, how we should define the other needs of these children? So far, good initiatives have led to a number of mistakes, among other things. Two words, segregation and institutions. They were always used side by side because people believed that children having disabilities should be raised in foster homes and considered shameful. Even the royal family of the United Kingdom once placed their two daughters in Scotland in a remote village because that was considered to be shameful. In the second half of the 20th century, in the West European countries, parents started looking for solutions and answers. In many countries, the state authorities started to send children with disabilities to conventional schools, starting from Scandinavia to the United States of America. So little by little, the institutions and various foster homes were shut down. Children stayed with their families, attending special or conventional schools, and the number of organizations to help the families and parents have grown up considerably. The fact that the child has to be raised in the family is witnessed by obvious progress because education and training raised the level of child's education. When living within the family, abilities of the children were much bigger and they found it easier to adapt in the community. This is especially evident in the case of children with autism. Probably you will all agree that a very big challenge for families is to raise and bring up different children. Therefore, we must help. Without assistance in such families, the stress and tension is increasing and families are destroyed. Parents separate. The stress which lasts for 7 days, 24 hours every day, leads to depression, disappointment of parents. It is necessary to help such families. It is not when parents decide to lock their children, try to commit suicides or kill their children, because this is already too late. We have to act in advance and to prevent the tragedy. As far as the state commitment is concerned, the Convention on the Rights of the Child of 1989 claims that the Convention does not commit state institutions to take over care of children from the family, and it does not take over parents' responsibility for its own children. How are we going to implement it? Families that raise children who are different must be helped. These families need financial assistance, training in order to understand and be able to raise a child who is different, physical support, psychological assistance in education, and creating structures and organizations that might help the child to become an adult. And even all of us who are attending this conference today need happy mentality and a happy attitude. Both the governmental authorities and community must understand that a child who is different is a full-fledged member of the community and has to be raised and brought up in his own family. Statistical data show that 1 out of 88 newborn children has a certain level of autism. The state has to participate in all the activities conducted by various communities related to such families. This is just a child's picture saying, let us help families to be different and happy. You see, everyone has a smile on his face. So as I have mentioned in the beginning, it is very important to ensure happy childhood of our children. Let us help and give an advice whenever needed. I thank you all for attention. And now, in order to give you best wishes from Jura Tender, I would like to introduce myself. I should have done that in the beginning. I'm a mother of 2 children, and the question is very simple. Who could know better than myself what my children need? Most probably you could give an advice how to raise my children better, but I believe that family and parents usually know that best. Thank you.
Ačiū.
Thank you.
Antras būtų
The second presentation would be on the topic of experience of Nordic countries. It will be presented by Ruby Harold Cleason, the president of the Nordic Committee for Human Rights. She already made a very interesting intervention in the press conference, so I believe that you will all be very interested to hear her here now.
Thank you. How much?
Too difficult, I think.
It's, yeah.
Maybe.
I can remain here. And there. Just a second. It's okay. Yeah. Good morning. I hope everyone can see me. My name is Ruby Harold Clausen. I was born in Jamaica. I'm married to a Swede. I met my husband while I was studying law and political science in France. And he took me to Sweden, and we have been married now for 43 years. We have 3 children and a little grandson. I am also the president of the Nordic Committee for Human Rights. I'd like to introduce the Nordic Committee for Human Rights to you. It is a committee that comprises of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland. We started in 1996, and as you can see, we have information about this conference is published. And we publish in 8 languages so that the world can see what's happening in Sweden. We want to tell what's happening. We have been working with the Nordic Committee for Human Rights since 1996 when it was started. And the reason why we formed the Nordic Committee for Human Rights was because we noticed that the same cases were occurring in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland. And the reason for this is that there has been a Nordic legislative cooperation since 1871. So the laws are made in Sweden and then exported to the other countries. And Sweden is more like Big Brother in the area, and since Sweden has these laws and the others just follow. We have, so we got together to start this Nordic Committee for Human Rights, and we have had several symposiums, and we bring in different lecturers from other parts of the world, and the Nordic countries, of course, to tell their experiences. Right now, we have, I will start my presentation by, it was, there, thanks. Yeah. You might wonder why we have such a long name, the Nordic Committee for Human Rights for Protection of Family Rights in the Nordic countries. Well, the reason, there are 2 reasons, but the most simple reason is because in Sweden and the Nordic countries, we usually talk about human rights, but it is out there. We externalize because they don't realize that we have problems with human rights in our own country on a daily basis. In fact, Sweden has been found guilty of violating its children's and their families' human rights on several occasions in the European Court of Human Rights. The founder of the Nordic Committee for Human Rights, lawyer and medical Dr. Siv Westerberg, she has won 9 cases in the European Commission for Human Rights and 7 cases in the European Court. She holds the European record of one single person winning so many cases against one single state. I have also won a case in the European Court of Human Rights. It was in April 2012. It was a child care case, but not one of the, it was a divorce case where the mother had taken the child. Unfortunately, it was not an anti-smacking case or a case with children taken into care. But I work a lot with those cases. So the reason for this long name, for the protection of family rights in the Nordic countries, we have to be specific. We work with with violations of human rights in the Nordic countries. There's a historical background to all of this, why the state has thought that it is better than the parents to take care of children. I usually say in debates, in Sweden, we don't need the family, we have the social services, because children are taken from their parents for the slightest of reasons and put in foster homes. They think that the foster homes are going to make the children better, but in fact the children are traumatized. So since the beginning of the 20th century, Sweden and the Nordic countries have all passed laws which give the social welfare authorities the power to forcibly remove children from the care of their parents on what we deem to be completely arbitrary grounds and place them in foster homes or institutions among total strangers. From 1920 to the present day, more than 400,000 children in Sweden have been removed from their homes and placed in compulsory foster care. The statistics for Norway and Finland and Denmark are almost as overwhelming. In 1924, the Swedish Parliament passed the Child Care Act. Can you hear me? Good, thanks. When the Child Care Act was passed, they had to create organizations and committees and other things to support the thing, because to support the law, because if they're going to take children into care, they have to have a set of foster homes, orphanages, child care institutions, and so on. And everything was put in place. There were even children put in foster care in private homes and on farms. So there was a problem with child labor. Children were not allowed to go to school, they had to work instead. And there was child abuse. They were beaten, they weren't given proper care, they were mentally, physically, and sexually abused. So children were taken from perhaps poor conditions in their homes, but they were put in even worse conditions in these foster homes. And there was a case that was mediatized as early as 1957. In 1957, the young journalist, Miss Lillemor Holmberg, she wrote several articles about the Blomqvist family in the municipality of Vetlanda. They had 8 children, and all eight children had been taken into foster care and put in separate foster homes. And the parents were not allowed to see them. So the children kept running home to their parents because they wanted nothing else than to be with their own parents. And they were always removed from their parents once again by police force and put back in the foster homes. And she wrote her first article that she published was called Legalize the Kidnappings. Legalisera de barnarov. And she continued to criticize the system, and also Professor Halvar Sundberg, he wrote a commentary, The Destruction of a Home in the Welfare State. Because that's what it was. There was mother and father, they were a big family, they were poor, but they were taking care of their children. And all the children were well fed and well cared for, but someone did not like the fact that this family was so big, and they thought they were disturbing the picture of the surroundings. And both Professor Sundberg's and Lillemor Holmberg's articles were highly critical of the procedures employed by the state to remove the children and break up the family. Then in 1967, the publicist Jan Gillberg, he interviewed Lillemor Holmberg on the topic of the Vetlanda case. And the title of that interview, when it was published, was called A Mother Asked the State, Where Are My 5 Children? 3 of the children had already they were so old, so they were no longer in the system, they were released. And in the interview, Ms. Holmberg had an interview with Minister of Government. At the time, her name was Ulla Lindström, and she recorded the conversation. And there we can hear Ms. Ulla Lindström saying that it is a scum family and they stick together like a clan. That's how disdainful a Minister of Government expressed herself about a family. Well, the Blomqvist case took place in 1957 and continued until all the children reached adulthood. So the taking of children into public care and placing them in foster homes in Sweden is a long-standing event, a long-standing practice. It's nothing new. Like I mentioned, between 1920 and today, over 400,000 children in Sweden have been removed from their families and placed in foster homes. That's like a big city. And in year 2005, there was a documentary, Stolen Childhood, and there the children who had been in foster homes were interviewed, and they told about the different abuses they had suffered in their foster homes. And a minister of the government, the Social Democratic government at the time, decided that he was going to start an inquiry into the foster care system. And when he decided to start the inquiry, I wrote to him and recommended him to take the inquiry to present day, because children in foster homes, even today, are being subject to gross abuse and violations of their physical, mental, and personal integrity. Anyway, he decided that the investigation would go from 1930 to 1980. And the reason for that is, he didn't give a reason, but I think the reason is because the law of the social services was passed in 1980. And they claim that the children who have been abused from 1980 and forward, they can report their cases to the police or sue the foster parents. Now, I have reported dozens of cases where my clients' children have been abused or have been injured physically in the foster homes. In one case in Arvika, a 6-year-old boy, he was playing in the foster home, in the outhouse of the foster home, and a heavy door fell over him. If it had struck his body, he would have been killed. But it hit his leg, and his leg was completely broken off, so the bones were sticking out. I reported that incident to the police. I reported the foster carers and also the municipality for putting the children in that wretched foster home. But the police and the prosecutors did nothing. They just, they never tried to protect the rights of children when they're in state care. They protect the rights of children against their parents, but not in state care. Anyway, this abuse and neglect inquiry went from 2006 to 2010, and over 4,000 persons, those who have survived the foster home period, because a lot of them have died. They have become victims of substance abuse, mental disorders, committed suicide, or they might have been killed in skirmishes with their other substance abuse friends. So 4,000 people witnessed and told what they had suffered during their childhood. And the investigators were shocked that people who had been paid by the state to take care of these children who were vulnerable and who needed protection, they claimed they needed protection from their families. But when they were put in these foster homes and in institutions, they were so badly abused that even these investigators who thought they knew everything, they were shocked. So the investigators suggested that there should be a compensation and apology for these children, or they're no adults. And in 1911 to 1912, there was a compensation and apology investigation. And there was a big ceremony in Stockholm, in the State House in Stockholm, for these children in November 2011. And, well, that was the apology. But then when it was time for compensation, it was recommended that these children should get 250,000 crowns per child, or per individual. But that was a lot of money for the state to pay, so they started trying to get out of it. They said, no, we can't give any compensation, it would not be fair. They wanted to grade and make a grading of the abuses that the children had suffered. But then afterwards the government changed its mind and said, yeah, we're going to give compensation. But then they have decided, they have now made an institution to give compensation to these people. And they decided that those who have been in psychiatric care will not get any compensation. But the reason that these people are in psychiatric care is because they were in foster homes. They are the first ones who should get compensation. But no, they are excluded from compensation. And the case with the Blomqvist I told you about earlier, 6 of the brothers and sisters demanded compensation. 3 have been given compensation. Well, the whole family was disturbed by them being separated and put in foster homes. How can 3 be given recompense or compensation when the others are not getting anything? So it has been a very unfair system. Towards the end of the 1970s, we got new laws in Sweden the Swedish child protection laws. The first one is in the Parent and Guardianship Code from 1979, Chapter 6, Paragraph 1. And then we had the Social Services Act, Law 1980, 620, and LVU, the Law with Special Provisions for the Care of Young People, from 1990. These laws have been revised from time to time, but I give the initial part of the law where they were brought in. The anti-smacking law, that's from the Parent and Guardianship Code, Chapter 6. It states, children have a right to care, security, and good upbringing. They should be treated with respect for their person and their individuality. They may not be subjected to physical punishment or other degrading treatment. Well, let's do a little comparison with French law. The French Civil Code, Article 371 says, l'enfant à tout âge doit honneur et respect à ses pères et mères. The child, no matter what his age, must honor and respect his father and mother. In Sweden, it's the reverse. The children are to respect and honor their children. The parents are to respect and honor their children. But the French law is more in accord with the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. Honor your father and your mother that your days may be long on the earth. In the Swedish law, the children are given their rights, are told what rights they have. They have the right to report their parents if their parents should slap them. But no one tells the children, and there's nowhere in the law that say that the children must respect and obey their parents. And there's nowhere in the law that tells the children what the consequences will be if they report their parents. And I come back to the anti-smacking law. The Social Services Act, it was revised in 2001, it was from 1980. In the second paragraph, it says, in actions concerning children, the child's best interest must be a special consideration. A decision or other action involving the care of or treatment interventions for children should be what is best for the child. And it says also, child signifies every human being below age 18. As you can see, that with the best interest, it has been taken from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 3. And in the law with special provisions on the care of young persons, called LVU, that's when they take children into public care, Section 2 says, provision for care. Care must be decided for physical or emotional abuse, misuse, inadequate care, or some other condition in the home which can pose a real risk that the young person's health or development may be impaired. Section 3 says, care must also be decided if the young person puts his health or development in serious danger of being damaged by the abuse of addictive substances, criminal activity, or some other socially destructive behavior. But I have no problem with Section 3. If a child does not know what's good for him, then he needs help. But Section 2, where they say, or some other condition in the home, it could be anything. And the social workers have the right to decide what is not good for a child. For example, if the parents go to the child care center with the child, and someone says, this child should go to a daycare center, and they say, no, we want our child to be at home, then that child can be removed from its parents and put in a foster home, where to be put in a daycare center. See, they have the right to decide what is best for the child in all circumstances. So, and that means the parents do not know what is best for the child. The anti-smacking law has been a big success story for Sweden, as some people say. I was at a seminar in Stockholm last Tuesday, and the person who was giving the seminar, she has recently started looking into the anti-smacking law, and she said it has been a fantastic success because so many countries have followed Sweden's example. 24 countries so far, of all the world's countries. And besides, she said that there's total consensus because everyone thinks that you should not smack a child no matter what the child has done. Well, there she also was completely wrong. But this anti-smacking law says that children must not be smacked no matter what they have done. And the parliamentary procedures were quite interesting because there were quite a lot of debates in the Swedish parliament. But they claimed that this law was to protect children from being beaten to death. Now, one child had been beaten to death in the 1960s. And then they used a big sledgehammer to rectify one case so that all the families of Sweden would now be under this anti-smacking law. But during the debates in the parliament, they said that foreigners cannot use as an excuse that we smack our children in our countries. And it was also directed against religious minorities, that they can't say that they're following the teachings of the Bible or the teachings of the religion that say you have to smack your child if the child does wrong. And the Standing Law Committee said only the provisions of the Penal Code would decide whether or not a crime has been committed if a parent should smack a child. That means the case would have to be reported to the police, and then the penal or corrective authorities would have to decide. In 2006, senior lecturer at the University of Stockholm, Hans Temrin, and his PhD student did an investigation which showed that in 35 years between 1965 to 1999, 258 children in Sweden were killed by their parents. 23 of those were ill-treated to death, and their investigation also showed that stepchildren were more often killed by ill-treatment than children who were killed by their biological parents. However, there are no statistics for the children who have died in foster homes. Lots of children have died in foster homes. And foster home deaths are neither investigated nor prosecuted. There's a case right now where a young girl, Donia Hassan, she was 15 years old. She died on the 29th of April, 2012. It was 2 weeks after her birthday. She died alone in her bed. She had developed pneumonia because she had had a cold and it developed. The foster parents did not take her to the doctor. They took her to the doctor to start with, and he said she needed rest and she needed a lot of liquids and so on, that she was to be in bed and she was to be properly cared. Instead, they took her to the foster parents had a stable with horses. So they took the child to the stable, and she had to keep on working as usual. And the day she died, they found her, she was already stiff. That means no one had attended to her during the night. They found her at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, how can you be taking care of a child who is sick and not seeing to the child, see if the child has had breakfast and how the child is feeling in the morning? She was already stiff when they found her. And of course, the child's mother reported it to the police, but the police have not, the prosecutor decided that he would not do an investigation. Anyway, the Nordic committee has started a procedure to have the prosecutor take it up again. We have asked Mrs. Siv Westerberg, who is both a lawyer and a doctor, to examine the case, and she has found that there was criminal negligence in the case. There was something I'd like to show you. It's just a second. I'm connecting to the internet, so I will. It will be easy to get this. Can you hear?
Thank you. More questions?
Oh, sorry. I need to just a second. Just a second. Pause. Could we get some technical help, please? And I need to get full screen. How do I get the sound? How do I get this full screen? I need full screen also. Yes, see if I can get I thought I got full screen. Yes. There. Okay. Thanks. Sorry about that. There's no sound. Still no sound.
Garso nėra vis dėlto. Sekundėlę palaukime.
We need more height, maybe more.
There were one death in 4 years.
Just a second, I have to start it again because you have.
Thank you. My question's for Sue Bradford. Sue, on the interview on TV1 with Susan Wood and Ruby Harold-Glasson, you made reference to Swedish stats regarding child abuse. For those that don't know, Sweden is held as a model of what happens in a country where you don't smack your kids. And you made the claim that there were one death in 4 years in respect of child abuse. Now, the Children's Commissioner has agreed that on average there are now 7 a year. In light of that, will you concede that the New Zealand public were misled by your comment?
I was using, I will agree that I didn't define the year that those statistics I was using was up to, which is quite a hard thing to do in a TV interview like that. It was very hard to get clarity. But in Sweden between 1971 and 2000, in 21 of those years, not a single child died from physical abuse. In each of the remaining 9 years, one child died from abuse. In Sweden between 1971 and 2000, in 21 of those years, not a single child died from physical abuse. In each of the remaining 9 years, one child died from abuse.
Yes, you see, this was I was in New Zealand in the year 2006 for the a parliamentary hearing. They were to bring in a so-called anti-smacking law, and I was in a TV interview with Sue Bradford. It was her bill. She was the one who proposed it. She was from the Green Party. And she misled the people, saying that not a single child died in Sweden from child abuse in 21 years, whereas the facts were quite different. And the same year that I was there were 3 children who were killed in Sweden. One was a foster boy, an adopted child who was killed by his adoptive parents. Another was a little boy who was killed by his mother and stepfather. And the third was also a step-parent case. How do I get it out again?
Yes, it's okay.
Oh, it's there, yes. Yeah. So I just had to show you how people can try to mislead audiences and to try to get you to follow their recommendations when they don't know what they're talking about. Well, the anti-smacking law was passed in 1979 to commemorate the United Nations Year of the Child. The law was passed with absolute majority. 259 members of parliament were for, 6 were against, and there were 3 abstentions. I describe it as mass hysteria in the parliament. Everyone wanted to protect children, but what they were protecting them from and what's going to happen to the children, no one had the faintest idea. Anyway, when the government presented the law, they said that it was primarily a valuable pedagogical support in the efforts to convince parents and others that no forms of violence are allowed to be the tools in raising children. The law, they said, would not expand the punishable area. That means it was not to criminalize parents. And that was what the government said when the law was presented to the world at Centre Pompidou in Paris in 1980. And in the article, Fessé, ils sont fous ces Suédois, smacking those Swedes must be crazy, I translated it. Those 2 articles are the most visited on the Nordic Committee's website. The French writer, Jean-Francis Helde, he said, I have seen the future and it doesn't work. He was a French correspondent in Stockholm and he had seen what was already happening in Sweden. And it's quite interesting, but the first case that took place was a case in 1978, that is 1 year before the law was passed. It was a summary judgment against a priest who had slapped his daughter because he was tired of her telling lies all the time, and he slapped her and she reported him. She had heard that this law was going to come, and he had to pay a fine. But unfortunately, he was not too good at law, because if he had been, he would have accepted to be prosecuted, because he could not have been prosecuted retroactively, because the law did not exist when the crime had been committed. But, well, he didn't know, so he paid the fines and got it over with. And since the anti-smacking law was passed, there have been thousands of cases. Thousands of parents have been prosecuted, and their children have been taken into care. There have been some very interesting cases where foreign parents their children have been taken into care. The Colasanti case, for example, it was in 2012. A visiting Italian politician, he was in Stockholm, and his son, 12-year-old son, did not want to go to a Swedish restaurant. He wanted to go to an Italian restaurant. And he just took off and threw a tantrum in the middle of Stockholm. He didn't know the city. So his father ran after him, caught him by his collar, and I guess he got hold of the boy's hair. And he said the people in Stockholm almost lynched him that he was abusing the child. Anyway, the child accompanied his parents into the restaurant, and someone called the police, and while they were sitting there at lunch, the father was arrested in front of his son and the other guests. And he had to sit in remand in Sweden for 2 months until the case was tried. And he was sentenced for child abuse, but he was released because he had already been in prison for 2 months. That case is on the Nordic Committee's website also. And there's a case that is ongoing now, the Malaysian case, the children in Stockholm. This took place in the middle of December. On the 18th of December, the Malaysian parents they're Muslims. They were arrested and placed in custody, in remand, and their 4 children were placed in foster homes. According to the newspapers, one of the children had told someone that his parents had slapped his hand because he refused to pray. Muslims pray often, and he didn't want to pray, so his hand was slapped. And then it all started, the feather had turned not into a hen, but into a whole farm of chickens. And the children were in foster home. They were put in an ordinary foster home. The parents had asked that they should be put in a foster home with people with the Malaysian consulate and embassy in Stockholm, because the father, he is working in Sweden on a diplomatic passport. He's not accredited to the government, but he has a diplomatic passport, so they can be prosecuted. Anyway, the children were put in an ordinary Swedish foster home, and relatives of theirs, they're a well-off family in Malaysia, they came to Sweden to see their their relative children. They were not allowed to. But then the Malaysian government, the president, sent his vice Minister of External Affairs to Sweden. He arrived on the 30th of January, and on the 31st of January, those children were back in Malaysia. You see, foreign governments are beginning to see what is happening in Sweden, so they have started protecting their children. There was a similar case in Norway in 2011. A geoscientist's children were taken into care. He was working in Norway, in Stavanger, to help Norway to get oil from the North Sea. And he brought his wife and their 2 young children. But the mother was criticized by the child protection authorities that she didn't change the baby on a changing table. She changed the baby's nappy on the bed, and that she fed the little boy with her fingers instead of feeding him with a spoon. And the children were put in separate foster homes, so they couldn't even keep contact with each other. Well, they were very small. One was 2 and the other was about 9 months. The child was still breastfeeding, and she was removed from her mother. And in November 2011, a Norwegian court said that those children would remain in foster care in Norway until age 18. Now, the parents' visa would expire on the 8th of March 2012. But these children were to be kept in foster care in Norway until age 18, and the parents would be allowed to see them once a year. But this geoscientist, he was very resourceful, so he contacted the Indian government, and India sent an emissary in February of 2012 and informed the Norwegian government that these children were neither stateless nor orphans, so they should be returned to India immediately. And in April 2012, the children were back in India. And also Russia has been very decisive in cases with Russian children who have been taken into care in Finland and in Norway. Like I said, foreign governments have started reacting. But there was a case even much earlier, in 1987, Germany made Sweden release the newborn children who had been in foster home. They were half German, half Swedish, but they wanted to reside in Germany, and the German government, well, that was before Sweden became a part of the EU, and the German government made the Swedish government release those children. Linda Skugge, She is a journalist in Sweden. In 2006, she wrote an article, "We are bringing up a generation of monsters." I translated it from Swedish. And only in last week, I saw an article from the Telegraph. It was published in December, where it says, "Swedish parenting has created a nation of brats." And I would like to show you something from, this is from a village in Austria. It was from 1990, where once upon a time Swedish youngsters would leave and visit these ski resorts during their February holiday, but they were always so badly behaved that in Austria they put up flyers in the area: "Scandinavians, we don't want you here anymore. You are ruining our village. Get out and never come back." You see, when you can't tell your children how to behave, then they will not be accepted by anyone. And what I have heard also, that not even the Danes or nearest neighbors accept the behavior of Swedish children. I think Søren knows something about that. But this is how these children, they have been behaving so badly that they're not welcome to visit other countries. And what happens to families when parents are accused of smacking their child or their children? Well, they are exposed to two sets of court procedures. You have the procedure in the administrative courts concerning the removal of the child from the home and for foster home care. And you also have the criminal cases, a criminal case, where parents risk jail time. The Penal Code, Chapter 3, Sections 5 and 6, say that they can have to serve up to 10 years for smacking a child. However, the Latin sentence, "ne bis in idem," is not applied to smacking cases. You should not be prosecuted or punished twice for the same offense. But in child care cases, they're punished twice for the same offense. They're punished for having smacked their child, and they're punished for, by losing their children. But the punishment for these children is even worse, because they lose their families, they lose all the context that they have grown up in, they lose everything. And they have to adapt to the social workers and the foster homes, because they have to survive. It's like the Stockholm Syndrome that was noted during the 80s, when those people had been taken captive by the bank robbers in Stockholm. They started saying, "Oh, we trust them. We don't want the police. We don't want any external help." They were completely relied on the kidnappers. And that's what happens to children in foster homes. They don't have a choice. There was a case in Upplands Väsby with 3 Polish children who were put in foster home and raped. The foster father was sentenced to 8 years imprisonment, and the children were put in the foster home, but they were removed. And after that, their parents were sentenced for child abuse in the lower court. But the parents appealed, and they were completely freed in the Court of Appeal, which showed that the parents had not abused the children, but one of the children told the investigator that they had been instructed to say that mother and father had hit them with a belt. And right now I'm working with a case with a Gambian family, also in Upplands Väsby, and it's the same social worker who has taken that child into care. The family came to Sweden on the 19th of January 2012 with a 6-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy. 5 months after they came, in June 2012, the little girl was removed from her family and placed in a foster home. What had happened was that this little girl, they had put her in the English school, and it's a Muslim family. And one day at school, they had served pork. And this Muslim girl, she couldn't eat pork. She was not allowed to. But the teachers told her that she had to eat it because otherwise she would have to go hungry. And she ate it and complained to her parents when she went home. And the parents spoke to the teacher and the headmistress. And they promised that it wouldn't happen again. Then after that, there was a little boy in the class who told the other children in the class not to play with her. She was the only black child in the class. And the little boy told the others not to play with her, so she didn't have any friends. And she didn't want to go to school. So one morning she was crying, she didn't want to go to school, and her mother tried to coax her, to convince her to go to school. She didn't want to go to school. So her mother smacked her lightly and said, "You have to go to school." So the little girl was still crying, and when she got to school, the teachers asked her why she was crying. And she didn't say she didn't want to go to school. She said, "Mommy slapped me." And that started the ball rolling. The child was taken into care in June 2012. And since then, she has not been allowed to see her parents. Now, how can you do that to a 6-year-old? I wonder. Anyway, the family, the mother had to return to Gambia, and she took the little boy with her, and she left him there. So they had hoped to have a good family life in Sweden, but instead their family is completely broken up. And since the little girl was taken in June 2012, in the space of 11 months, she was placed in 4 separate foster homes among total strangers and not allowed to see her own parents. That's the way they give children protection in Sweden. Another 10 minutes? Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, the Swedish constitution requires equality before the law. And parents are prosecuted for claims that they have smacked their children. But foster parents are not prosecuted despite forensic evidence or testimony from victims of abuse in TV documentaries. There's an institution called Oasen, the Oasis, in Arneby in Sweden. The owner is a man named Rune Nansén. He told the National Board of Health and Welfare, Socialstyrelsen, that he and his staff had desisted from the practices that these children had complained about. They are not being prosecuted. But if the parents say, okay, we won't smack our children anymore, they'll be prosecuted just the same because they had smacked their children at one point. They had broken Swedish law. Aftonbladet, the evening newspaper, had some smacking polls in 1987. I have to go back out here to show you. There it is. I guess you can see that. These polls were taken down very quickly because they showed that despite the fact that we had had the anti-smacking law for 30 years, this was in 2009, most of the people who had responded to this investigation, this inquiry, they could be prosecuted for smacking their children. So it disappeared from the internet very quickly. I mentioned earlier that there was an article in the Telegraph about Swedish parenting has created a nation of brats. And they illustrate it with this little child. It was published in November 2013. It's still on the internet. I'm going to find it myself this time. There? Yes. There. Thank you. So Sweden punishes parents who punish their children. In Sweden, there's to be no violence against children. But you have, at the same time, television with a lot of violence. You have films with a lot of violence. You have these video games with a lot of violence. They have not tried to address that problem. But already during the discussions of the anti-smacking law in 1978, people asked, what about this other kind of violence? But nothing has been done about it. So if they want to get violence out of the society completely, they have to address the violence that is being shown on television and in these video games, but they haven't done so. But what is more dangerous for a child? In Sweden, in the preparatory works, they said that even sending a child to his or her room is belittling and is child abuse, because the child is separated from the company of the family. But then they take the children and put them in foster homes, far from everyone. You know, there's no sense of proportion whatsoever. So what is more dangerous for the child, a slap from the parents or removal from the family and being placed to live with total strangers, who in fact are only interested in money? And the rest of the world wondered what was happening in Sweden when this law was passed. Anyway, Kofi Annan, the former General Secretary of the United Nations, he decided before he left office that all the countries of the world must have anti-smacking laws. But only in Finland, of all the countries that have adopted an anti-smacking law, did they debate the issue. And the minister, legislator, Matti Savolainen, he explained his reason to approve the law. He said, henceforth, there will be no subordination of children under their parents. And this has been quoted in books that have been written by Professor Jakob Sundberg in Stockholm. Now, who should children be subordinated to, if not their parents? The social workers, the foster parents? You see, there are two different principles guiding family. You have the individual principle, which is in the Nordic countries, these social welfare states, where it's the individual against the state. Family is not necessary because the state will take care of you from the cradle to the grave. And then you have the family principle, which you find in the Catholic countries and in Greece and in most of the world, where family is the cornerstone of society, and family in all different international documents. We have the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and even in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, where family is supposed to be protected. And in European Union documents also, family is the cornerstone of society and to be protected. But that's not the case in the Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, and Finnish welfare states. And I was asked earlier if there were other reasons to take children. Yes. Like I said, any other reason that a social worker or an official can come up with. I'm working on the Dominique Johansson case. I've been on it since 2010. Dominique Johansson was a 7-year-old boy whose mother is from India, father Swedish. He was kidnapped from the plane. The mother and father had decided to return to India to live. They met in India. The father was doing voluntary work in India when they met. And they decided that they would return to India to live because they had been living in Sweden for 7 years. Dominique was born in Sweden. But since they were going to move, they decided that they wouldn't let him go to school in Sweden because both are university graduates. So they could teach him, give him home schooling. And they did so, but the authorities did not approve of homeschooling. And they were taken to court and fined on several occasions. And in 2009, they had a hearing in May, and the father said you have been harassing us for such a long time. Our project to leave has now materialized, and we're going to leave. Then the judge asked, when will you be leaving? And he unwittingly told the date that we're going to leave. He said they were going to leave on the 25th of June. On the 24th of June, the social workers made the decision to take the child into care immediately. But they had already left Gotland. They were living on the island of Gotland. They were in Stockholm at Arlanda Airport. And they had already gone through security, and they were sitting on the plane when the airplane was boarded by armed police, and the little boy was taken off the plane. So the parents, they couldn't continue their trip to India. They had to get off. They couldn't leave their only child in Sweden. And the child is still in foster home. And last year, the guardianship was transferred from the parents to someone outside the family. They claimed that they had not been taking proper care of the child because he was being homeschooled. And after they took him, they found out that he had not been vaccinated and that he had a few cavities in his milk teeth. But many children get cavities in their milk teeth. And they had already planned, because Annie Johansson, the mother, she has relatives in India who are dentists. And they had already discussed the matter with the relative, and he was going to take care of Dominique's teeth. And Dominique was to go to school in India. But he has been taken and put in a Swedish school, and that is a violation of the European Convention of Human Rights, Additional Protocol 4, Section 2, which says everyone is allowed to leave any country, including his own. But this child was denied the right, the child and his family were denied the right to leave Sweden. And once upon a time, we saw that Eastern Germany, Communist Poland, and many of the Eastern Communist countries, that's the way they treated their citizens. They were not allowed to leave the country. So it's not a very good example that Sweden has been following. In Sweden, we have forced adoptions. This transfer of guardianship is almost like forced adoption. The parents have not seen Dominique since the 22nd of November 2010. And he has not seen his parents either. And they don't know if he's alive or dead. They get no information whatsoever about their child. So they are just in Sweden waiting to get their child back. The Council of Europe have directives on child-friendly justice from 2010, but there's non-adherence to that directive in Sweden. Because you can't call it child-friendly justice when you remove children from their parents, the world that they belonged to from the start, put them among total strangers. It's like taking a plant, cutting off its roots, and putting it in fresh earth, and thinking that it's going to spring new roots and survive. They don't always survive. Now, what is the cost of social protection in Sweden, Finland, and Norway, and Denmark? I think Søren will tell you about that. In Sweden, the estimate is that children cost about 1 million crowns per year, per child. But that does not include lawyers' fees, investigators' fees, social workers' salaries, and the judges' salaries. And there have been cases, for example, in Nybro in 2002, the salary that was paid to the foster home Kristin Sävsjö was 10,000 Swedish crowns per day. That is about 1,100 euros per day to take care of one child. And if that is not trafficking with children or commerce with children, then I don't know what is. The social workers usually refuse to deliver information that the parents have the right to get about the foster parents, what kind of people they put their children to live with, and also the foster home contracts, what they have told these parents, these foster parents. Because I saw in one case that the foster parents were told that they could have the child as long as the child was underage. And according to Swedish law, these cases are supposed to be reviewed every 6 months. Now, that makes reviews every 6 months just a show without any factual value. And there's an appearance of stock market companies that are running foster homes now. So there's a lot of money into the foster home business. In Sweden, they usually talk about full transparency. We are allowed to know how much our king, called 16th Gustav, earns. To the last penny, we are allowed to know. But we're not allowed to know what the foster homes are being paid to take care of these children. In Sweden's 5th periodic report to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, it's for the period 2007-2012, in Table 40 you'll find titled, Children Deprived of Their Family Environment. That's the right way to state it. In 2010, there were 24,900 children in foster care in Sweden, and in 2012, there were 27,000. So the numbers are not going down. Instead, they're becoming more and more. And there is a very interesting song from this famous Swedish singer. Her name was Alice Babs. She died only last week at age 90. She sang the song Philosophical Dixieland. It says, I translated it, you should do what the Svenssons do and not be different from the crowd. You must believe what the Svenssons is what you call the Swedes, like Kiwis is what you call the New Zealanders. You must believe what the Svenssons believe if you think anything at all. To always be the one that disturbs may not pay off in the long run. You should do what the Svenssons do if you do anything at all. Thank you very much.
Ačiū, poniai Ruby.
Thank you, Mrs. Ruby. The presentation was really very interesting, and I believe it is extremely valuable to our legislators, because the draft law has been submitted to the Ministry of Social Affairs and Labor, and now I would like to give the floor to our Danish speaker, Søren Bernard Lindergaard, to share his experience with us.
Tai aš atsisėsiu, bandysiu garsiai kalbėti. Labai svarbu norėčiau, kad...
May I ask the speaker to put it more precisely what institutional care means, because we believe they don't have institutional care in Sweden. I'm very sorry, we have to interrupt you because we will have time for questions later.
So, what did we just witness here? Most of you probably think this was a video of a child and a natural mother, but this was actually a video showing a child placed in a foster home, and the woman screaming loudly was the foster mother. The reason why I have taken this video is to show that the foster families don't always, as Ruby said, do a good job. I can tell you that this foster mother has, or had, 3 children in her care. Today she only has 2. The child which was screamed at here has been removed and placed in another family, but the 2 other children are still in her care. The Danish police raised a case against her, claiming her for being too violent against this child, but they lost the case. She was found not guilty. So, I wanted to start with that video to wake you up if anyone was feeling a bit tired. I'm going to tell you about forced removals of children in Denmark. First of all, I'll give a short presentation of myself, and then I will talk about some statistics from Denmark, then a little about the procedure in Denmark and how the system works, and some of the cases I've had. I would also start to say thank you for having me in this lovely country of yours, even though when I left Denmark it was 10 degrees and the sun was shining, and when I landed here it was snowing and I was freezing. But still I'm glad to be here. I'm 30 years old. I have been practicing law since 2001. I'm a partner or owner in a company called Vilnius, which is placed on a small island you don't know. And we are part of Denmark, which is a chain of Danish law firms, and I'm on the board of this company. I'm living together with Jette. We don't have any children, or not yet anyway. I've taken this so you can see what my work consists of. Normally, 50% of my time I use on commercial law. 50% of the time I use on other areas within the law, and only 5% of my time is used on forced removals. So why am I here today? Is it a mistake that I'm here today? No, it is not, because the 5% of my work is the thing that is most close to my heart. The clients I have in these cases are often in contrary to the clients I have in commercial law, clients who are at the bottom of society. It is clients who have very few resources, both mentally and economically, and it's clients who don't have a big network they can rely on. So often I'm their only friend, and I'm sure Ruby can agree on this. So that's why I have these cases. I find them very interesting, and most of the time I also feel that I can help the families whose children has been removed. So now I want to show you some statistics about forced removals in Denmark. As you can see, the numbers of decisions about removals in Denmark has been falling. This includes not only forced removals, but all sorts of removals. Removals where the parents agree upon the removal, or where the parents has died and you have to remove the children. The numbers has been falling, as you can see. I don't know why they have been falling, but I think the reason why they are falling is money. In Denmark, as is also probably here, in 2008, we had a big financial crisis. So we lack money, and we have to cut into the things who are expensive, and as Ruby showed you, this is an expensive area. So that's my own opinion, but I think that's one of the reasons why the removals has gone down. This is the total number of children who are living away from their family. As you can see, this number has also been falling, and that's very natural since we are not removing as many as we did before. But still, it's 12,000 people or children who are not living with their natural family out of a population of 5 million. And now we come to a statistic that I find very interesting. This statistic shows the number of forced removals each year in Denmark, and the percentage of forced removal seen against the total number of removals. And you can see a short rising in forced removal. But the interesting part for me is that the percentage of forced removal, that's the black line, has been rising. And what does this show? Yes, I think it shows, again, the system lacks money, so the social workers who work with these cases don't have enough time to work together with the families, and then the families and the social worker get in a conflict, and that often makes a case of forced removals. Again, it's my own opinion. I don't know it's right, but I think that's how, or that's an explanation why the percentage of removals are rising. The next one, I must say, this is some statistic that's older than what I have just shown you. I couldn't find newer statistics. I don't know why, but that's how it is. This is to show you that often in these cases, the local authority doesn't do their job well enough. Often they don't do what the law says they has to do before we remove the children. In 55% of the cases, there's not made a full examination of the child and its surrounding. You have to make a 360-degree examination of the children and its surroundings. And why is this important? This is very important because when I have to represent the parents when their child has been removed, it's important that we have the full picture of what is the reason why the children should be taken away. And often we don't have enough paper or enough to work on in these cases. So that's why the law says you have to make this examination. And often we don't have it. When the examination is made, it has to be closed within 4 months from the start. And in more than 15% of the cases, this time period is not fulfilled. The reason why there's set a period of 4 months is that in these 4 months, the parents don't know what is going to happen with their child and what is going to happen with them. But this often drags on and drags on and drags on. So the local authority is not doing a job that is okay here. Also, in 27% of the cases, there's not made a plan of action. A plan that should say what should happen to the child the next month, the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and so on. And also, what should we work on the parents? What should we do with them so that they can be better parents and the child can come back again? And often this plan is not made. I don't know where those 27% come from. In the cases I have, it's much higher. But also, if this plan is not made, it's for the parents very hard not to have a plan. They don't know what will happen, they don't know whether the children will come back or what they have to do to get the children back. So, the final statistic I have for you is removal by age. And you can see that the biggest group of removals are in the age between 15 and 17. And that's also leading to one of the problems in Denmark, at least. When you turn 18, you are on your own. And if any of you can remember how it is to be 18, you are still a child. You're not able to take care of yourself, at least not all of the children. I, for instance, didn't move away from my mom until I was 20. So, but now in Denmark, we are seeing in more and more cases that the social workers help the children after they have turned 18. And the government is helping them, trying to do more for the kids who are from 18 to 21. And this is also very important, I think, that you not leave the children alone just because they turn 18. The small group from birth to 3 years, it's not a very big group, but the group is growing. And the group is growing in the direction where we are taking more and more children away from the parents right after they have been born. 2 to 3 hours after the birth, we're taking away the children from the parents. I don't know if you can imagine, this should be the most happiest day in your life. You're being a parent, and then 3 hours after this, the children are removed. You don't know where they go. You don't know when you are going to see them again. And the group from 0 to 3 years, more than 50% of the removals here are children who are taken right from the birth. So, I've printed for you the Danish law, and I've printed it in Danish, and I hope all of you can read it. And for those of you who can't, I've highlighted the words who makes the law. In Denmark, when you have to remove children from the parents, there's one paragraph we use, and that's paragraph 58 in the service law. Only one paragraph. That's pretty much it. And all before you can use this paragraph, the child has to have a risk of being damaged on its health or on its growth. Sorry. And if you have this risk that the child's health or growth could be damaged, then you can go down to number 1, 2, 3, or 4. And if one of those are fulfilled, you can take the child away. The first one is the one we use, or the one the social workers use, if they think the problem is by the parents. And number 1 says that if the child's health or growth is damaged because it's not getting enough care from the parents, you can take the child away. And as Ruby said in Sweden, you can put almost everything in here. It's very bright. You can imagine everything used to taking away the children. And number 2, it's not used very often. That is, if the child is abused or admitted to violence, then you can take it away. It doesn't have to be violence by the parents. It can also be in the environment, the place where the parents live, or relatives of the parents. Then you can remove the children. Number 3 is not used very often, but if the child has a drug problem, an alcohol problem, or other social difficulties, you can take away the child. And finally, number 4, if the child has other behavioral or adopting problems, you can take away the child. And now you have all you need. Number 4, you can take all cases that you can imagine. Number 1 and number 4 is the reason which we always see in this the argument from the social workers when the child is taken away. Oh, sorry. So, a little about the procedure in forced removals. Before we have to start, or before they start the case of a forced removal, the local authority has to get suspicious. And how do they get suspicious? In 40 to 50% of the cases, they get suspicious on their own. The family has a history, and they are monitoring the family, and they are getting more and more scared, and then they start the case. On second place, we have the parents themselves. The parents write to the social workers that they have a problem with their child and they need help. And often that results in a forced removal. So the parents is screaming, help, 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 and the child is removed. And number 3 on getting suspicion is the child. The child is asking for help. And number 4 and so on is the school and the kindergarten. So now the local authority has got a suspicion that something is wrong with this family. And now there's 2 routes. Number 1, cooperation, you work together with the social workers. I always say to my clients, do that. Work with them as long as you can, because they have all the power. It's us against the system, and you have to work together with them as long as it's possible. I had a case once where I had 2 parents who had a child who had been removed right after birth. And they called me for help. And I said, let's try to work together with the social workers. And the social worker called for a meeting, and the agenda for the meeting was, we have to work together. And they asked if I wanted to go, and I said, okay, let's go. So we went to this meeting. We sat down and we had coffee and we got the presentation done and all that. And then the social worker started and said, this is my plan. Bloop, bloop, bloop. If you are not willing to work with me on this plan, the ultimatum is the child is removed and it stays removed. So much for working together. If for some reasons the parents cannot work together with the social worker, or the social worker thinks we have to force remove the child, then we take the road which I have called force. And if it's a case of forced removal, the social worker who thinks this should be done has to present her case for the child committee in the local authority. The child committee is a committee in which there is a judge who is the president. There are 2 people who are elected, and there are 2 people who are appointed out by the social minister. These five people decide whether the child should be removed or not. If the case is urgent, if the social worker thinks this case is very urgent, then she can present the case for the president alone, and he can then say, okay, I think you have to take the children now. And then the social worker goes out to the parents with the police and everything and takes the child away. If it's a president's decision, his decision has to be presented for the committee within a week. And the committee only has to look at, was his decision right in accordance to the information he had on that day. So if I, in this week, have sent a lot of papers in showing that the decision was wrong, those papers play no role in this part. They only have to look at, was the president's decision right on that given day? And it always is. I haven't won any of those cases. So, the president's decision stands, and then you have to put it for the committee, and the committee has to see or have a look at the case in a normal procedure within a month. When the case is presented for the Children's Committee, we often only have 20 to 30 minutes at all to present our case. That includes the questions I may have to the parents. It includes any documents I would like to present, and it includes my legal opinion of the case, and finally it includes the parents' last word. So 20 to 30 minutes to decide whether the child should be removed or not. If the case is lost in the Children's Committee, and often it is, then you can get the case tried by the appeals board. The appeals board is a board placed in Denmark, which role is to oversee that the local authority is doing what it should do, treating the children right, doing the right things, and so on and so on. But if I want a case tried, I write to the local authority, I want the case sent to the appeals board. And then the appeals board gets the case, and then they send back a date and a time where I have to meet in Copenhagen with my clients. If for some reason I'm not able to meet that day, that's just too bad. It's that day or nothing. I had two clients who were coming from far away from Copenhagen, and they were driving in their own car. And 5 minutes before we had to go into the appeals board, they called me on the phone that they had been in a car accident. Nothing serious had happened, but they would be an hour to an hour and a half delayed before they would come to Copenhagen. So I went into the committee or to the appeals board and said, can we please wait? They're on their way. No, we just have to go on. They had to be there in time. So I had to present the case alone and say if my clients would have been here, they would have said so and so and so. And of course, we lost the case. If the appeals board decides to change the decision, they can change it partly